And I think we are going. We are live. It looks like all three are going. I have been trying to unmess up my settings from the last one we tried to do back when my computer was messing up. So everyone let me know if you're seeing this in full picture quality. It should be. See, it's all sorts of little things that got messed up. It looks like we're still 720 going out instead of 1080. That's fine. As long as that's the only thing that's going wrong. How you doing, Chris?
Okay.
Yeah, here the weather, probably because of Hurricane Melissa, the weather really turned on me this week. So yeah, I've been pretty miserable, which is why the camera's not on. I got the new computer. It's up and running, and I'm confident that I would be able to run the camera on it. I'm just not in any condition to right now. And I
I'll be
want to
right back. I gotta go
experiment
to the
with it
bathroom.
because I'm wondering if the problems I was having with the webcam, that caused me to start streaming through the action cam. But how many of those webcams were because of the problem I was having with the old computer? I need to get back up and do some experimenting with that. But it looks like we got a nice stable connection, 0 dropped frames. So when people start typing in the chat, then I guess we'll know they're there. YouTube is always laggy on the chat. Oh, there's one. Name, last name first. Thoughts on voting? Voting for what? That's just kind of random. That's a random question. If it's a tax increase, the answer is no. We want all these new bonds for it. No. And I want more people to watch Brewster's Million so they can get behind a none of the above option. But none of the above on every single ballot. Every single race. That should always be an option. Well, I guess neither one of us are that talkative, and the chat's kind of quiet
Yeah,
too.
sorry. Yeah, sorry. Also got kind of a headache.
Oh, yeah, I've had that all day.
Yeah, I'm not the biggest fan of seasonal change. It's only gonna get
Yeah.
it's only gonna get worse when they mess up with the clocks again.
Oh, yeah, that's going to be the worst.
Why do we do that again exactly?
Because people are stupid. They say Ben Franklin came up with the idea, but he was joking.
Yeah. Same thing with the turkey. Like so many people say, it's like, oh well, Ben Franklin wanted turkey to be the state bird of the United States. Yeah, but he was joking too. Yeah, people fail to realize Ben Franklin was kind of had a very sarcastic sense of humor.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And also, fun fact, the early colonists at Plymouth and well, they actually didn't need all that much turkey. I mean, there were turkeys around; they had them occasionally, but it wasn't like I think the more they got away from the coasts, they started eating turkey more. But yeah, Plymouth, Jamestown didn't eat that much turkey. I think my voice might be going. All right, Chad, is this frozen up on me already?
Oh, excuse me.
Huh? Okay. Just that one so far. And I don't see anything on Rumble or Odyssey either.
Okay. Yeah, sorry. I'm just taking some. I was just taking some Excedrin for the headache.
Yeah. Now, wait a minute.
Yeah.
Because Rumble is going through a nice clip. Odyssey said, okay, Odyssey is having trouble. It's reconnecting. All right. I don't know what's going on with Odyssey. We're not live streaming on Odyssey, apparently.
Hmm.
Yeah, Odyssey is definitely having connection
Hmm.
issues.
I mean, I guess we could talk about the upcoming snap riots that are probably going to happen. Hmm. Honestly, is it just me, or do I think the only reason government canceled Snap was just to attack Trump?
Yeah, it's theater because, I mean, first of all, guess what? The congressmen and senators are still being paid, aren't they? They're getting all their benefits.
Yep.
They just want it to be something visible that's felt by a lot of people.
Yeah, I know the perfect solution to prevent the next government shutdown. It's just that. Just say, okay, new rule. If the government shuts down, then all the politicians, they don't get paid, they don't get their benefits, nothing until it's resolved.
And it's affecting my wife's store because she's having to go back to like last year's figures and do seasonal comparisons and everything to try and figure out, how much money they're going to lose by people not having, Snap to come and buy groceries with.
Mm. Yeah.
But the problem
Or
is like
people who
the,
do
the
show.
things that all the TikTokers are saying, they're acting like Snap is supposed to be like a lifestyle or something, instead of a safety net that you
Yeah.
use occasionally when you're down on your luck. They act like it's something that you just live on for life.
I mean, that's always been an issue with a lot of the welfare programs. It's like I understand why it's there. The problem is that there unfortunately have been some people where for them it's actually a way of life. Yeah. Like they go on and they're like, well, how am I supposed to feed myself if I how am I supposed to afford stuff if I don't have a if I don't do this? It's like get a job. What? But get a job.
And there are jobs around. I don't want to, like everywhere you look, they're understaffed.
Oh yeah.
Everywhere you look.
Speaking of understaffed, did you see that video I posted by Steve IOE where he tries to portray, a comedic version of why hospitals are so understaffed? And he's complaining that, hospitals are understaffed, but the proposition that the president of the nurses union in that skit, that would only make the staffing situation worse.
Yeah, I didn't see it.
Oh, basically in that skit he's portraying the hospital owner and CEO as like a greedy businessman, and the nurse is like, it's like, listen, we demand a 25% pay raise, access to on call nurses unions. And I'm just thinking that's only going to make the situation worse, because one, the increased pay raise is going to price newer, less experienced nurses out of the market, and not only that, you want them to be unionized nurses. That already narrows your mind.
Yep.
Yeah. I've actually heard from some people say that's actually another reason why hospital staff short are so short. It's not just the fact that that there's a monopoly on government licenses. A lot of doctors, nurses, and all that are unionized, and like all union jobs, they have strict entrance levels.
Yeah, and government restricts the number of licenses they hand out.
Like, what's the dumbest thing that's like that makes me wonder why that makes me questions if unions are really pro workers is again, because this has happened. Well, what if a person doesn't want to join the union? What if he doesn't want to pay the union dues? As a worker, it should be his right, but most labor unions like, well, if you don't want to join, then you're not allowed to work here.
Yeah, and you're a scab and everything.
Yep.
Which, if they were really beneficial, they should be able to get workers to join them without doing all of that.
Yeah.
So why would they need the support of the law?
Yep.
I mean, I got a video on what they did to Food Lion back in the 90s just because they had the vote and the workers said, no, we don't want to unionize. We don't even want to have the meeting to say whether or not, because you got to get like, I think 30% of the vote to agree to have the meeting to discuss whether or not to unionize. They didn't even want to do that. And all of that crap that ABC did to them by sending those fraudulent reporters in to make that fake report on them. That was all just revenge from the union.
Yep.
United Food and Commercial Workers Union. They're a fucking mob, I'm telling you.
Yeah, that's something that a lot of labor unions don't want to talk about. Don't want to talk about is that a lot of the first labor unions, they were protection rackets for the mafia.
I think a lot of them probably still are.
Oh yeah, especially the Teamsters. The Teamsters were infamous, for their cozy relationship with many mafias.
But I mean, how do you just have a connection to a major network like ABC with, I forget if it was 2020 or one of the others, but it was Diane Sawyer, who's like one of the most prominent journalists in the country. How do you get like a direct connection with them to run a completely fraudulent story? That kind of connections, that's organized mob.
Yep.
And that's what we're seeing, a lot here as well, because the government will say, wait a minute, what's this? What's all this money we're giving to this NGO? What do we do? Let's look into it, or let's cut their funding or whatever. And then what happens?
Yep, they throw a fit.
Even got judges to just stamp them as like, no, you have to keep paying them. What, president? You think you're in charge of the executive branch like the Constitution says you are? No.
Yeah. It's just like what's happening in Oregon, Oregon and yeah, where Gavin Newsom and all that are saying you can't do that, Trump in Oregon. That's unconstitutional. It's tyranny. It's like, it is. It's in the Constitution. And people say, no self-respecting president would ever have the National Guard turn on state authorities. Eisenhower did it.
Oh, a lot of them did it. A lot of the
Yeah,
things that, like with the labor unions that they blame, like the Pinkertons for, that was actually the National Guard.
yeah.
Wasn't the Pinkertons? They didn't do anything.
That's only why, I agree that, even though I'm not the biggest fan of him, almost all the criticism of Trump, it's not valid criticism, it's just TDS.
Well, and they're complaining about Trump doing exactly the same things that Obama and Biden and all the others did in office. I mean, yeah, Trump's more visible about it, and Obama was good at hiding it.
Oh yeah.
Trump just comes around and says, "Oh yeah, that's what we're doing."
Which, in all honesty, I think that's also another reason why a lot of people voted for him was because, even if they didn't agree with him, he was like one of the first politicians who was largely open with what he wanted. Most politicians, even if they do what Trump does, they don't openly say what they're doing. They're like, well, no, we're not doing that. We're just doing this, that, and this, that, and that. That's totally nothing from what you're criticizing me for. That is what I'm criticizing you for. Well, you're wrong. That's not it. It's different.
All right, I think Odyssey is going to be a lost cause for tonight, but I'm still seeing it's going on Rumble. Yeah, hopefully people will start chatting and let me know for sure that this is actually working. Looks like it's working except for Odyssey.
It's sad. Even South Park got tedious. Like, no joke, in their recent season, they're literally making it out. They're actually comparing Trump to Saddam Hussein.
Oh yeah,
Because
same
in the
voice
new
and
season,
everything.
Trump,
Yeah.
he's lovers with Satan flat out says, "You remind me of someone I used to date," and I'm like, come on, people. Trump's a lot of things, but he's not Saddam Hussein. Like, is he throwing people in prison? Is he launching gas on innocent people that disagree with him?
Well, even Saddam Hussein wasn't doing a lot of that. A lot of that was propaganda. It ended up not being true. Oh, okay.
Yeah,
We
there's
did
actually
get.
a lot of.
You do have Mr. No in the
Mm,
chat. The
mm,
Garrison Trump is the best Trump. Yeah.
yeah. That's what a lot of people were saying too. They're saying it's like, listen, if you're gonna make fun of Trump, fine, but have Mr. Garrison come back as it, because he was actually pretty good as the president. The one thing I didn't like about South Park when they were doing that is that they were trying to make it as that it's like, oh yeah, he doesn't know what he's doing. That's why he's a terrible leader. It's like, I've met quite a few people that flat out said that's why they voted for Trump, is because he didn't know what he was doing, and his presidency would largely be a farce, and that's a good thing. Whereas Hillary, she knows what she can do if she's ever elected president, and that's what scares me.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, the
That's
funny
the thing.
irony is that
Trump's first term, the deep state just blindsided him throughout most of the whole thing.
yeah. And also, I'm not gonna lie, the scene they did, with Hillary Clinton, where they portrayed her as just parroting what her party was telling her to say. That joke easily could have been perfect for Kamala Harris, because that's literally what she did.
Yep.
Yeah, that's the reason why people didn't vote for her. It wasn't because they were stupid rednecks, that were tired of the woke shit. It was because it was either Trump or Harris, and you could see from a mile away Harris was literally just doing whatever her opponents were telling her to do, or her
Well,
party was telling
and
her to do.
didn't even understand it because they'd ask her a follow-up question and she would just like fall back on irrelevant talking points. It's like, do you even know what you're talking about? That's why CBS had edited that one interview of her.
I'm back. Sorry, my mom called me.
And there was no primary. Yeah, they they just said, "Hey,
Yeah,
Democrats, we're not going to have a primary. We're going to tell you who to vote for." I don't know.
mm,
After the 2024 election, how can anyone ever trust the system again?
mm. And actually, I was watching a video about South Park and all that, and what some people have actually brought up, which is a pretty good point. Why South Park's been on the decline in quality lately. It's because and it's not necessarily their political opinions. It's the fact that that's all they're covering is politics and Trump, and it's like whatever happened to the boys just going on wacky adventures.
Yeah, and then they'd make fun of other stuff that's going on in the news that wasn't political.
Yeah, I mean, hell, a perfectly good example is, the first episode with involving Towley. The whole joke of that episode was that there was this supermassive conspiracy involving aliens, secret societies, talking towels, and cloning, and the boys don't give a crap. The only thing they care about is getting their brand new game system back so they can waste their time playing video games. Like literally, there's a famous monologue, where one of the characters is explaining the story and the conspiracy and what's going on, and Stan just goes, "Dude, we don't care."
And remember when they were taking down fraudsters like John Edward and
Oh
Scientology
yeah.
and everything?
Oh yeah, that
They
was
they, they
yeah, if
could
I
make
recall
some
correctly.
awesome episodes about like the bullshit about opioids or the big
Mhm.
acupuncture scam that's going on. Because basically, I think they made it so that every single insurance company has to cover acupuncture now. And they're saying, no, you don't need opioids, just use acupuncture.
Yeah. To be fair though, it's easy to blame the doctors, but I don't 100% blame them for saying stuff like that, because the sad reality is that they just don't want to go to jail. And I'm
Well,
pretty sure they've got plenty of.
that only goes up to a point. Yeah, they don't want the DEA to bust their door down for being a pill mill or whatever. But when they go beyond that and they start pushing things like the spinal injections because they make a lot of money doing it, that's when my sympathy goes away.
I mean, I know Penn and Teller brought it up in one of their bullshit episodes, but yeah, there was a case where a guy was was arrested for having for having pain pills, and he was accused of being a dealer. And they said, oh, he had X amount of pills and all there, like he had like thousands of pills. That's clearly not a month's prescription. Then they actually showed you the pills he had, and they were super duper tiny.
Yeah. That's why you should be suspicious every time you read a story like that and they give you the number of pills.
Yep.
Like, oh, there were
Yeah.
like, so many bajillion pills. They don't tell you what dosage is. They don't tell you like it was this many, milligram morphine equivalents or anything. The actual
Yeah.
dosage.
Yeah, I mean that's a really old fallacy you talked about. The it's over 9,000 fallacy, where they tell you, we found over like 2,000 pills in this guy's, and this guy that's clearly a dealer. But then actual medical field experts point out it's like, no, that's just a standard. That's actually a standard month's prescription. And they say, well, why would a person need 2,000 pain pills? Because it's like, because typically for a person that has like chronic injuries or nerve damage that requires those painkillers, it's not just they take one pill once a day and that's it. They need to take multiple pills throughout the day.
Yeah, like 2 pills every 6 hours or whatever.
Yeah,
And that adds up.
yeah, that's why when opioids are prescribed, like a month's dose, there's usually like a couple thousand pills just because of that reason. It's you know
Well, and except they pull it back to say, well, you can't have, any more than this much per month. But it's like that has nothing to do with patient's need. It's a completely arbitrary amount.
Going back to South Park, it's one thing I also like about that one particular episode is that the kid who's portraying the drug warrior, he's not upset, that people are dying from opioid overdose. He's upset by the fact that they're playing popular, children's mascots, and he thinks that they're dying, which kind of makes me remind, it's like, yeah, nobody gives a crap unless, a famous celebrity died and opioids were blamed on it.
Yeah.
Because, like, let's be real, there are some people out there who are genuinely addicted to opioids and their addiction got them killed, but it's like nobody gave a crap about them because they were just a statistic. It wasn't until all those famous celebrities started dying that people were like, oh no, opioids are the worst thing in the world.
When really it wasn't even opioids, it was the fact that they were taking opioids and alcohol and all these other drugs
Oh, yeah.
together.
Yeah, that's another thing. That's another thing that they tell you. It's like what kind of drugs were found in the dead celebrity's body? Well, we found opioids. Opioids. See, it was opioids that killed them. But then you actually look at it, it says, oh yeah, we found opioids, we found cocaine, we found marijuana, we found a whole bunch of alcohol in their system. It's like, well, yeah, the real mystery isn't how they got the opioids. It's how they didn't overdose sooner. It's even worse though, because you said you've encountered this, and a lot of people have encountered this too. Is like when you have genuine chronic pain and it's getting worse and worse, and nothing's touching it, rather than putting you up for that program, that will allow you to get the more powerful opioids. They brand you as, I think this person's a pill seeker.
Yep. That's
Yeah.
drug seeking behavior. It's like,
Yep.
yeah, I'm seeking the drugs that will treat my pain. Thank you very much.
Oh yeah.
And I still haven't heard back from my pain clinic about whether or not I'll be getting a regular pain doctor again. So they'll probably have to send me off to some other random guy for a bridge prescription.
And I think there was actually someone else that pointed that out. The whole thing with the drug war too is another issue too with the drug war is because it's easier to blame the drugs because yes, addiction is real, but here's the thing, and I've seen plenty of therapists say this, like if your body is dependent on a drug, even though you have no biological need for it, like like you're not in chronic pain, but you have to take opioids because it makes you feel better, that's inherently a mental health issue, and I think that's the problem because mental health issues, are complicated, but the government wants a quick fix, that they can point to.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like,
They
oh
they
yeah, the
what what
opioids.
what what did it go? They're looking for the solution that's neat, plausible, and wrong. I think that was H.L. Mencken.
you know, or it's the classic, as we call it's the classic street light effect. Addiction is a complicated mental health problem, but they're looking for the drugs because it's like, it has nothing to do with the drugs, but we're looking at the drugs because it's easier to see. The old saying, "Oh
I,
yeah,
lo-
I
I
lost my
lost the
car."
quarter over there, but I'm looking for it over here because the light's better.
Yep.
Oh yeah, the net zero solution for COVID, which didn't work and caused all sorts of other problems. Whereas instead of saying like, look, we're managing risks here, people are going to die from COVID, we got to accept that. But
Yep.
as we're trying to minimize the deaths from COVID, we want to make sure we don't, make
Yeah.
other issues worse so that people die from other things. But nope,
Yep.
COVID was the only thing that mattered.
I mean, yeah, that's something that the government still doesn't want to take advantage over. There's many medical doctors out there that think that the reason why we're seeing a mass increase in mental health issues and depression was because of the pandemic. And we basically shut everything down.
Oh, looks like we got a few from Fighting Zen too. Shows us a video of Philip K. Dick from 1977. And I'd love to see drug warriors try to debate Scott Horton, but won't for fear of being exposed. Yep. And then the Guardian on Jeff
Who's Scott
Lamping.
Horton again?
Scott Horton is the he's I think he's an Austrian economist, or he's at least in with that crowd. I'm trying to think. I get him and Mark Thornton mixed up. Yeah, people always talk about how, it seems like that with COVID, people feel that science got discredited, but it's really just the science that was done by government that got
Yeah.
discredited.
Yep. Just like how we have separation of church and state, we need to have a separation of science and state.
Yep.
Yeah.
Because government is authoritarian, science is anti authoritarian. They don't mesh,
Yep.
they're fundamental opposites.
Yep. I mean, we saw it with the whole. I mean, look, we saw it with the whole climate change debate. There's, nobody's denying, that climate change, is having. But the problem is that they're still debating on, what's the damage in the fullest skeptic. And the only reason we hear that it's 100% our fault, and unless we radically change society, we're all gonna die. That was because literally a lot of climate scientists were flat out told you got to look for solutions that benefit the government.
Yeah.
Yeah, because if mankind is 100% to blame and we're all gonna die, that's good for politicians because they have a grievance have a grievance if the conclusion is, yeah, it's happening and mankind is partially responsible for it, but at the end of the day, climate change happens all the time and it's a natural process and it's not going to be the death of us all. Well, what are the politicians supposed to say then? Politicians don't get reelected by going everything is fine and dandy. They get reelected by saying by saying you've got a problem and I have the solution.
Well, it was mostly to push an environmentalist agenda,
Yep.
which is really just a socialist agenda in disguise.
Yep.
Whereas now that you're getting more and more people behind nuclear power, and it looks like we're going to have a resurgence in nuclear power, more and more scientists are coming out and saying, yeah, it was never really the case. There was never really any sound science that global warming is an existential threat to humanity. It's a problem that we need to deal with, but it's not going to mean our extinction or anything.
Yeah. It's not going to be like the day after tomorrow. I actually saw like a climate scientist react to the day after tomorrow, and he was laughing throughout the whole film because it's like, listen, if like literally, the Earth falls apart, climately, like in that short period of time, we would have seen it coming a long time. It wouldn't be everything is hunky and dory, and then it's like, hey, wait a minute, why are there super violent, F-16 tornadoes in Los Angeles? Why is California on fire, and why is everywhere else it's freezing over? What's going on here? It doesn't work like that. You would see something like that coming on from a mile away.
Well, and it would take like decades to ramp up to it.
Yeah.
But politics works better when you can scare people.
Yep.
Because
Another
scared
thing too is
people
that
don't make rational decisions.
yep. Oh yeah, and the movie also tries to blame, like Republicans or pro-capitalists, saying it's like, by the scientists saying if we don't act now, we're all gonna die. And again, as this climate scientist pointed out, that if that was going to happen, if that was the case, there would literally be nothing humanity could do to stop it, other than just okay, seek shelter, prepare for it, and wait it out, which is ultimately what they end up doing in the film.
But you're seeing the same thing now with AI. AI is going to kill us all. It's an existential threat to humanity. We need to stop AI. Just making people afraid of it. Because, again, scared people don't make rational decisions. So AI is going to kill us. AI is going to take our jobs. AI is going to impoverish us and enslave us and everything else. Unless we get government to regulate it, of course. Because that always works. Zen says, I once believed that anti AI hysteria, but no longer. That's
Yeah.
good. Maybe I had a little bit to do with that. I've been making videos calling for a little bit of
Yeah, I
sense.
mean, it's one of those things where, like, I understand, and like, yeah, there are some valid concerns with AI, but it's not like it's going to be the end of the world. It's just another tool. There were concerns when photography came out.
Well, I mean, how many things did I list in the podcast, the segment where I took down Matt Walsh for saying that all of the jobs I listed, it was just kind of brainstorming. That wasn't even the result of like research. All of the jobs the technology took away without replacing, like the elevator operators. There's no one that replaced the elevator bellhops.
Yep.
And he totally missed the point about automobiles, because I don't remember if I got into this point or not. But, if you say, well, automobiles just replaced carriages, but most people weren't driving their own carriages. The carriages had their own drivers.
Yep.
And people
Yeah, sure.
went from that to people driving their own cars around.
Yeah. Well, and we still have private drivers. A lot of rich people have chauffeurs, and
Yeah, but it's not like
yeah,
everybody like it was before.
yeah. I mean,
Actually,
that's another
actually,
thing too. Like,
it's a lot more similar to Uber and Lyft.
yeah, I mean, Yeah, I mean, cars didn't take away the jobs from taxi cabs and chauffeurs. They just switched their operation. They just said instead of horses and buggies, let's use cars.
It's the same thing, but it's just like Richard Wolff was, screeching a few years ago about the kiosks that McDonald's comes in, because you just pull in and you just walk in and order from a touch screen, and then they don't have to pay someone to stand there and take your order. Well, that's taking away
Hmm.
jobs. That's going to impoverish people.
Going back to the whole stamp thing, that's another thing we see with a lot of like those entry level jobs like McDonald's. Like, there's some people that acts like, that's like a career choice. That's something you live off of, where really it's more one of those, I forgot what the term is, but it's basically an entry job. It's a job you enter because you're inexperienced and you don't have enough, stuff, to back you up. It's something to get your foot in the door. Or it's something you do on the side, like when economic times are hard, like when your standard job's not paying enough and you really need to make a little extra money, and you find out, oh yeah, McDonald's is hiring a temper is hiring, people, just like to work on weekends, and it's like, I can do that, that's what it's for. It's not something you're supposed to feed a household off of.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you can, live the rest of your life, working at McDonald's. It's just that you'd have to adjust your life to do that. You basically have to live like a college freshman for the rest of your life, and a lot of people don't want to do that.
Hey,
Coming
we
back
got
to
a bunch
politics, a
more
lot of
from Zen. I'm just going to put them on the screen for a second here.
oh,
People
okay.
can pause if they want to read it all.
Hmm. Oh, yeah, and another TDS topic that's going on is Trump renovating the White House.
Oh
Hmm.
yeah, putting in the ballroom, like wait, what? Why is that a controversy?
Yeah, he's not the first one. He's not the first one to renovate the White House. It's been renovated many times before. In fact, I think it was Truman. I think it was Truman. Truman once renovated the White House, and he didn't do it, because he wanted to install a ballroom. He had to because the White House was crumbling.
But like several presidents, like I think Obama and Clinton and others were saying, the White House needed a ballroom, but they couldn't get one put in for whatever reason.
And that tweet, I don't know if it was Harris who put it, that tweet where it's like, it's not his house, it's your house. It's like, no, the White House is the office of the presidency, and as long as he's in charge of the executive branch, he can do what he sees as reasonably fit to it.
It's his office and his residence,
Yeah.
and he has 100% control over it.
Yep.
Just like Congress has 100% control over the Capitol building.
Yep.
Which is how they could tell Trump not to send in the National Guard on January 6th and then blame
Yeah.
him for not sending in the National Guard.
Yeah.
Because he doesn't have authority there. Congress does.
Yep. Yep. Yeah, if I recall correctly, the only time he can send the National Guard into Congress would only be like if something were to happen there, and the Capitol Hill Police is overwhelmed, and Congress says, "Hey, can you send the National Guard, to repel like the attackers?" Then he could do that. But
Yeah, he can do it with their
with that,
permission. They can give him
yeah,
permission to bring him in, but
yeah,
they didn't do that. They denied him.
yeah. Like if I recall correctly, like Trump was offering, it's like, listen, do you need any help from any like federal agencies or the National Guard? And they're like, no, you can't do that. This is congressional territory. Congress will handle it.
Yeah, both Nancy Pelosi and the mayor of D.C. said, nope, you can't do that. Didn't Truman put in a bowling lane? Someone put in a bowling alley. I'm not sure which one.
Nixon. Nixon was the one who put in the bowling lane. I also know FDR put in a theater. He installed a movie theater. I know Teddy Roosevelt installed a lot of sports stuff.
Yeah, they're just fishing for controversies.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I mean,
I think the real difference with Trump and other presidents is that how the hell do you bribe Trump?
yeah.
He's already filthy rich. I don't even think he's taking his pay as president. From what I read, he's putting it back into the treasury. So he's not even taking a
Yeah, I think
paycheck.
I think he did. I think he did that. I think he did that during his last election too. Like he only took like a couple bucks, and he put the rest back in the treasury, or donated the rest that he couldn't give back to the treasury to charity. Because as he pointed out, it's like, listen, I don't need the I don't need the presidency, and I think that's the reason why a lot of people also liked him too, is because he does genuinely seem like he cares for America. And look, we can argue that the policies he's implementing are bad, but there is a sense of sincerity with him. Like, he's doing this because he genuinely thinks, this is good for America, whereas most politicians generally just go with whatever the party line is. It's like you have to support this policy of, see, well, can I at least question it, or question where it doesn't work? It's like, listen, whether or not it works is up for debate, but that's what the party's going with, so that's what you have to have. Also, did you see that cringy Wikipedia article I put it on fail quotes where they said libertarian authoritarianism?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Seriously, someone should go on Wikipedia and set up an article for theistic atheism.
There was someone on the talk page who said something like that. If you scroll down the bottom, you can say, why does this page exist? There's no such thing. You're not even
Yep.
saying anywhere in the article that there's any such thing. You're talking about people talking
Yeah,
about other stuff.
yeah, literally it seems like the logic is just that, libertarians tend to be anti-democracy, so clearly that means they're authoritarians. Like, well, no.
Democracy is a form of authoritarianism.
Yeah, we're not criticizing, rule by the people or the governed. We're just saying, it's like, listen, democracy is not really a good way to carry it out, because people can be manipulated, and if your country is a pure democracy, well then it's not really a rule by the people. It's ruled by the mob. Yeah, I think it was Walter Williams that pointed it out there. The best proof. The best way to understand why democracy is just as bad as totalitarianism is, think about it. Imagine if so many everyday day stuff you did in life, was up to a democratic vote. You wouldn't see it as just. You'd see it as tyrannical.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I know you said it was hyperbole, but you know what? But you know what else is technically a democratic process? A gang assault. You know, well, you said something
Yeah,
else, but I don't want to get you demonetized. Yeah, because
all but one
yeah,
agree to it.
yep. You know what that whole, libertarian, authoritarianism reminds me of? It reminds me of like some of those quote unquote anarcho go socialists that says, well, capitalism can't be anarchy because it has a hierarchy and anarchists are against hierarchies. It's like, no, they're not. They're just against the establishment of a state. Like if I recall correctly, the
Yeah,
whole idea
it's
that
without rulers, not without hierarchies. I don't
yeah,
know where they get.
I think that probably came about like in the 19th century when communism was becoming popular and there were many communists that were trying to appeal to the anarchies and all that. And when people and when some people were saying, well, you can still practice free markets and capitalism and an anarchy, they're like, oh no, because that's a hierarchy which is going to lead to a state. Communism, gets rid of hierarchies.
Yeah, except it
Which by
doesn't, does it?
Yeah. I mean, the reality is, and this is something that I wish people would realize, it's literally as long as humans are social animals, it's impossible to have a community or whatever without some kind of hierarchy.
Just for
The
organizational
only
purposes.
yeah, yeah, like even in sports team, where they, even in sports, where they always say where they always say there's no I in team. It's supposed to be a collective group. They still have like star players. Like everyone knows who they still have team captains and they still have that one guy who's directing. They still have coaches and everyone and there's a lot of strategies that often revolve around okay throw it to throw it to Jenkins because he's our best runner and he's fastest. That's why I also hate it when like they try to appeal like like they say it's like communism is just like a sports team. It's like no, it's not.
Yeah, not in any way.
Yeah. Yeah. Like, look, the whole thing about the whole there's no I in team, that's just, a motivational thing that coaches say. And let's be real here, and some athletes will confirm this coaches aren't always right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Our football team in high school, the only time they won was when they decided not to listen to the coach.
Yep.
We're just going to do what we think is best.
Yep. I mean, I mean, it is true. I mean, it is true. That cliche that a coach is just a guy, who used, like there's a Smith that, well, didn't this coach used to play the game? It's like sometimes that's true, but in many other cases, it's literally just a guy who applied for the job. That was actually a problem with Major League Baseball. So many people were saying like, why are baseball refs, so stupid, and why are they making all these dumb calls, which were clearly, not a violation at all. And the reason is because, and I've heard this from people that are inside of baseball, it's because baseball referees, a lot of them have never played baseball before. They literally just went to a camp for it.
See, I'm looking at headlines. Here's another example of what we were talking about earlier, because in the Outer Banks, you have um, all of these beachfront coastal homes that are, falling into the sea. And they're like, whoa, see, it's global warming. It's rising sea levels. It's like, no, the sea levels aren't rising that fast. It's happening because the Outer Banks are very dynamic islands.
Yep.
And the shorelines are constantly changing. And you even have new islands showing up and disappearing.
Yeah, it's just like what
And if
happened in
you're
Hurricane
stupid
Katrina.
enough to build beachfront property on an island like that, bound to happen.
Yep. Yeah, I mean,
Because
I think that happened. I think that.
people think like, oh, it's an island, it just sits there and it never changes, and the shoreline's always the same. Well, not in the case of the Outer Banks, at least. And wasn't there
I mean, it's just
something
like,
years ago? I was
I mean,
reading something like off the coast of Iceland. I think there are new islands appearing and disappearing all the time.
you know, it's another really dumb, it's another really dumb thing I've been hearing about people, and it kind of goes to climate change. Is that I remember reading that there was a scare, for a while that because of global warming, some of the permafrost, was melting, and that means some bacterium like anthrax, will which was previously frozen will come back and it'll kill us all because of that. And I'm like, I kind of doubt that would happen.
Yeah, I mean it's soil, so if anything, it would just become fertile again, and you'd get plants growing again.
Yep.
I don't know why that soil would have anthrax in it. You'd have regular soil bacteria in it.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, yeah, it free
Yeah.
up lots of farmland.
Yeah. Yeah, like there actually was one. I remember reading there was actually one scientist who got a lot of criticism because he was part of the whole global warming debate, and he actually said that actually in some ways, if we properly plan and manage our way of living, global warming could actually have some positive benefits to it. Yeah, it'll be bad for some species of animals, but most animals, and especially humans, they'll just adapt and they'll move on. It happens all the time.
Well, that's something else a lot of scientists were saying was like, yeah, global warming is going to have bad effects, but it's going to have good effects as well, and we just need to
Yeah.
do a little more of a study on how much of the bad effects versus the good effects there'll be. And like, no, no, no,
Yeah,
no,
I
no,
mean,
you
I
can't
think
go telling people that.
I mean, a lot of people are talking. I mean, a lot of people are talking about. Well, are you a climate scientist and all that? But I think the biggest advocates that were pointing out that that listen, climate change isn't really going to be as big of a world ender as we think it is, are actually paleontologists because they literally study this.
Oh yeah.
There was that one. Yeah, there was that one extinction event that happened like before the dinosaurs, where like 90% of all life on Earth was wiped out, and people think, well, that must have been an apocalyptic thing, and that was bad. It's like, yeah, it was bad, but here's the thing: if that event didn't happen, life in its current form, as we know it, wouldn't have happened because that event led to higher levels of oxygen in the Earth's atmosphere.
Are you talking about the Permian extinction
I think so. I think
or the
so.
one before it?
The one that occurred before the dinosaurs popped up. It was like
Yeah, I think that was the Permian.
yep. Yeah, I mean, life's pretty, people fail to realize the Earth and life on Earth is a lot more resilient than we give it credit for. Like there was one scientist that even said that. It's like everything that people are worried about that could happen to Earth, it has happened in the past. Oh, a supervolcano could kill us. Supervolcanoes have erupted in the past, and yeah, they caused some bad stuff, but humans survived.
The Permian Triassic extinction event, also known as the Great Dying, a little over 250 million years ago.
Yep. I saw this one dark comedy one time that made fun of, the pro-extinction people that said that humans should go extinct and let Earth heal itself and all that, and they said, if humans go extinct, life can return to normal and all that, and it had a funny ending because it ended with the last human, going extinct, and he says, and as he dies, he says, "Now you can heal, Mother Earth." And after he dies, an alien race shows up, and they said, "Good, there's no more intelligent life on this planet. Okay, boys, we're gonna claim it. Let's wipe this planet clean of life and start mining it." Yeah, basically, aliens arrive and they turn Earth into a strip mine because there's no more intelligent life, so now they can legally claim it because of galactic law.
Yeah, so this was caused by several major eruptions of volcanoes and supervolcanoes that destroyed the ozone layer, which is something they used to fearmonger about quite a lot.
Yeah. To quote Jurassic Park, life finds a way.
Yeah, even though that movie said it in the dumbest way possible.
Yeah, it is true.
Yeah, because reptiles and amphibians have been known. It's not a mysterious thing. It's called parthenogenesis. And anyone who actually knew biology wouldn't have been that surprised by it.
It also it also got something majorly wrong when they were talking about geneticists. They were talking about the animal population, and they made a very error scientific statement that anyone could debunk, even amateurs, and that's when Dr. Wu said all vertebrate embryos are inherently female. Anyway, they just require the right hormonal stage to make them male. No. When we're in the womb before the X or Y chromosome takes effect, we're hermaphrodites.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's basic human biology.
Yeah, so the first big one is the Great Oxidation Event, or the oxygen catastrophe in the Proterozoic eon. That was when you had the cyanobacteria creating the oxygen, and it wiped out a lot of the anaerobic bacteria. Then you have the Ediacaran extinction, which resulted in the Cambrian explosion, which is where you have all of the basic body plans of all of the major vertebrates and other animal groups. And let's see, what's the next one? The Great Ordovician Biodiversification Event,
Yep.
and then the Permian, and then the KPG
Yep.
extinction. The Big Five.
Yep. But another reason why we shouldn't fearmonger too, and then I think this only proves my point. The reason why such an event like that isn't likely to happen is because humans, are unique animal species compared to all those. Because one of the reasons why a lot of those animals died wasn't because it was such a cataclysmic event. It's because they were simply primitive life forms that couldn't properly adapt. Humans are extremely adaptable creatures. That's why in the movie Carnosaur, the main villain is a scientist that wants to wipe out humans and replace them with dinosaurs again, and she claims because humans destroy the earth and everything. And I'm like, if I was in that movie, I would have loved to tell her, okay, I got a question for you. Hypothetically speaking, what happens if a supermassive giant asteroid comes to Earth again? How are the dinosaurs going to fix that problem?
Yeah.
Yeah, because we as humans, we can figure out how to stop that asteroid. The dinosaurs could not.
And we got all sorts of ideas for how to stop asteroids.
Yep.
Most of them involve learning about them sooner,
Yep.
because if they're far enough away, you don't have to deflect them as much.
Yeah.
And then there's just becoming a multiplanetary society, because if you
Yep.
have people on the moon and Mars, then we as a
Yep.
species will be less susceptible to that.
Yep.
Well, at least some of the stories are acknowledging that the housing collapses are from erosion and not rising sea levels.
Oh yeah. But of course, they try to blame everything on Man Bear Pig. I kid you not, I once saw an article that tried to blame Man Bear Pig on earthquakes. It's like, people, climate change has nothing to do with earthquake. Earthquakes are caused by tectonic movements within the Earth's crust. That has nothing to do with the climate.
Well, there was those news reporters on CNN or whatever when they were talking about asteroids hitting the Earth, you know, saying, well, if climate change would just make that work. What the hell does climate change have to do with whether asteroids are going to strike Earth?
Yep. I mean, I think what they're trying to say is that they're trying to say, well, because if climate change is happening, the asteroid, will cause all this environmental damage, and that'll make it so much worse. It's like, listen, if a meteor hits us with such impact that it causes like a dinosaur level event, that's going to happen no matter what state of condition the environment is. Because again, just look at the dinosaurs. Earth wasn't polluted and full of CO2 when the asteroid hit, yet that still, caused the extinction event.
I don't know how they pick a lot of these headlines.
Now let's
And
talk about
so you
paleontology or
have
my.
that oh damn, don't pop up ads. Oh, can't see the guy's name now. Oh yeah, Larry Sanger. He's the co-founder of Wikipedia, has been critical of the way Wikipedia has been going these days. He just praised Grokpedia.
Yeah. Oh yeah, Wikipedia's
Because
gotten bad. Like I
it's
remember,
pretty easy to battle test the thing.
the funny irony is that one thing that made Wikipedia so good in the past, was because anyone could edit it, at the time because I really forgot what the term is called, but it's like that old phenomena. The best way to get the right answer isn't to ask for it; it's to give a wrong answer. Like if you want to know what 2 + 2 equals, you don't ask, hey, what's 2 + 2 equal? People are gonna laugh at you. You say, hey guys, did you know 2 + 2 equals 74? And you're gonna have everyone say, no, you idiot, it's 4.
Yeah, Sanger is criticizing the reliable sources and perennial sources page, which
Yep,
say that you have all these tiers of credibility, and
yep.
whereas all that did was just put bias into the pages.
Yeah, I mean, literally, the reason why it's happening is because, like, no joke, there's literally people that are trying to correct stuff on Wikipedia, and they're saying, well, it's not reliable. It's like, well, why? Well, because the rule says it has to like have like some sort of credibility site, and they looked it up, and what does that credibility have to be? It has to be from a quote unquote reliable source, i.e., a mainstream news media source. Because we all
A
know
mainstream
mainstream.
news media source that the editors approve of.
Yep. Yep, that's the reason why when you look up the Wikipedia article about Charlie Kirk, a lot of it, while they do talk about what happened to him, they also have an entire section dedicated saying it's like we also need to remind you though that the majority of political violence is still done by the right. It's like who said that? A mainstream media article said that. I think
Okay, what
Mentiswave
was their
actually did a
source?
yeah. Well, here's the thing. Mentiswave actually looked into that. When people say, well, the majority of political violence is still done by the right, and he looked it up, and surprise, surprise, guess where they got that conclusion from? Because they cherry picked it. They only counted political violence only if it resulted in someone dying, but they ignored things like, like the riots, where, yeah, almost nobody died, but there was a lot of property damage done, and it was still a threat of violence, but they don't count that. Basically, it's the equivalent. Basically, what the news media is doing is the equivalent of a guy pulling out a knife on you and saying, I'm gonna slit your throat open," and then when you punch them, they're saying, "Well, why did you punch me? Because you said you were gonna slit my throat." Well, I didn't actually do it.
Yeah, you have to wait until they kill you before you can defend yourself.
Yep. Yeah. Yep. That classic thing. It's like. It's like those stupid kids that happened in that news article, where they got shot over playing doorknob ditch, and like a lot of people were criticizing the homeowner, saying, "Why would you shoot them? They were just kids, pulling a stupid prank." It's like, well, here's the thing that they're ignoring: it happened at 11 o'clock at night, and the kids, weren't just knocking on the door and running, like they were banging on it, they were kicking on the door, and I'm sorry, in quite a few neighborhoods, if someone's kicking at your door at 11 o'clock in the evening, it's not a kid playing a harmless prank; it's a guy trying to rob you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that was what they tried to say about Trayvon Martin.
Yep.
Oh, he was just a kid who was buying some Skittles for his little brother. Come on.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that is true. What happened, but the thing that led to the fight was that look, when George Zimmerman confronted him and said, "Hey, what are you doing this time of the hour?" He could have just said, "Oh yeah, hang on, man. I'm just buying some Skittles for my little brother." What did he do? He said, "Oh, you want to mess with me, punk? Okay, fine. You want to mess with me?" And he started beating him up.
Well, and before that, remember, he had walked off and Zimmerman was going, okay, never mind, and was starting to go back to his car. Then Martin just came back to him and confronted him and started it up.
Yeah. I also loved how the news media was like showing all photos from his childhood, and they were ignoring like recent photos they took of him, and he was actually a pretty big kid. And another thing they ignored was that Trayvon had a history of fighting, and actually, very eerily speaking, the night that happened, like a few hours before he was shot, he was bragging to his friends via text, how he started a fight, and one of his friends says, like, "Dude," and they were like, "Dude, Trayvon, you gotta keep your temper, because if you keep fighting everyone that looks at you funny, you're gonna get in serious trouble one day." Yeah, like there were friends that flat out came out and said, yeah, he had a temper, and he had issues with authority, and he would fight people, who he felt wronged him. That's actually something that Thomas Sowell and Walter Williams, brought up a lot, when it came to the whole issue with blacks and all that. One of the reasons why blacks have a lot of issues, today, yeah, historical racism was a problem, but another reason is because, unfortunately, there is, a culture, a gangster culture within a lot of African American communities, that are telling you, it's like, oh yeah, if someone comes up to you and gives you shit, you gotta beat the crap out of them, and you gotta fight back, and you gotta trust no one. It's like, well, that makes you come off as being an asshole.
See, this is another time when I'm wondering if my chat is just frozen or if it's just quiet.
It looks like it's just quiet for now.
Yeah, okay, just quiet.
Yeah. Yeah, and Fun with Facts has been showing up like he said he would.
Yeah, that was why we had this tonight, but
Yeah, don't you love it? Don't you love it when people do that? They say, "Oh yeah, I'll absolutely show up," and then they don't show up, and it's like, "Well, why didn't you show up?" And they're like, "I don't know."
yeah.
I get it, real life, happens, but at the very least explain to me. Like, look, if someone called in at your job or whatever and you had to work or someone needed your help, fine, tell me that.
It's for the supporters anyway.
Yeah.
You knew when it was.
Yep. I think I've actually seen that a couple of times. Like some people are like, how come I wasn't invited to the live stream even though I'm a supporter? It's like we had the date up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm always putting it out. Say, hey guys, give me a night that works,
Yeah.
and then we settle on one, and then we do it. Want to come in? Come on in. I don't know what else I can do.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah, that line reminds me of that classic joke. Jesus, why didn't you save me from the flood? I sent 2 boats and a helicopter to rescue you. What more did you want?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, we have that big AWS outage that is having a lot of people ask questions about the infrastructure that the internet's going to.
Oh yeah.
Well, because the thing is, okay, AWS is good, Cloudflare is good, all those things they're doing are good, but they're run by single companies. And of course, they compete with each other when the idea of the internet was that the infrastructure was supposed to be open. And so when it came that, and the open internet routing done through the open routers and the protocols, when that got to where it wasn't that efficient, that's when you started having, these cloud providers, the connection providers, so that you could have a website and then have good connectivity from all over the world. But if you do that through AWS and AWS goes down, then you've lost the advantage of that.
Oh yeah.
Sky Server says my work systems were down all day. Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't know if that was because of the AWS outage or not, but yeah.
Yep, our security infrastructure.
But we're getting away from the idea of the internet. We did that with social media, but it's not like there was nothing social on the internet before. It was just done through open protocols like NNTP and IRC. And then, of course, they made it where, well, you had the instant messengers like AOL and Yahoo that wouldn't talk to each other. And then, Facebook and X and Snapchat and all these others don't talk to each other. They're platforms, not protocols.
Yep.
And so that's what's happening with internet connectivity. They're becoming platforms like AWS and Cloudflare and not protocols.
Mm.
Whereas if it were a case where if AWS went down, if Cloudflare would pick up the slack for it, that'd be a lot better, but that's not how it's set up.
Also, I don't know about you, but ads keep popping up in your video on the side.
They keep popping up where?
On my end, like they keep popping out like to the side, like the stream's still on, like it turns split screen, and on one side you got the podcast, and on the other side you got an ad playing.
Yeah, we have no control over that anymore.
Yeah.
Even
like no joke, like
even channels who have said, like the Blender Foundation has this problem because they're a nonprofit. They don't monetize with ads, and they have ads shut up on YouTube, and people are still getting ads when they watch Blender videos on YouTube. And Blender was like, well, we got our own videos. It's like video.blender.org. I think come watch it there.
Yep.
But yeah, and it used to be. We still have this interface, and I think it's just meaningless busy work now, where you used to be able to say, okay, put an ad here, put an ad here, put an ad here,
Yep.
and they're just ignoring that now and putting ads wherever they feel like.
Yeah, I think it used to be like that with YouTube. Like, obviously, you need some sort of income, but the difference between back then was that ads were a little bit more conscious, and like you said, ads, you had more control over which videos, had ads. Nowadays, it's like, yeah, even like a 10-second clip of you saying of like, let's say you're filming your dog making a funny noise, and it's only 10 seconds long. That needs to have a 30-second ad on it.
Yeah.
And it's just 10 seconds of my dog making a funny noise. Well, still needs a 30-second ad.
But it's like you put in like a 1 second pause where you think a commercial should be, and then YouTube says, okay, we'll stick them in the appropriate place, but instead of doing that, they cut you off mid sentence somewhere.
Oh yeah,
It's
yeah,
infuriating.
that's always fun. Like, especially when you're watching like a crime documentary, and all of that, and they're talking about, and it turns out the killer was actually. Hi, are you working? Hi, are you tired of unfair insurance ads? It's like, what?
Yeah, the local channel would cut in with a commercial there.
Yep. I mean, at least with TV shows, they would have the common courtesy to say that. They say, and the killer who actually, and the person who actually committed the crime was information we will reveal after the commercial break.
No, I mean, sometimes they would, just because the timing was off or something, come in with a commercial too early or something.
Yep. Yeah, it's even more fun when the commercial airs twice in a row.
Or when you just get it over and over and over again.
Yep.
It's like, guys, I've watched one show and I've seen your commercial 5 times.
Yep. Like, I don't know if it was true or not, but I remember like there was one. I can't remember, but I remember hearing like a rumor that there was one incident at a local TV channel one time. Like, it was like a local channel, and people were complaining, that they were getting nothing but advertisements, and apparently it turns out that the station was having some kind of equipment malfunction, and it wasn't actually going to the show, so it just kept playing commercials on loop.
Or something would happen where they would have like the 30-second space for the local commercial. Something would happen and the local channel wouldn't get the signal, so you just had a black screen for 30 seconds. And
Yep.
then the program started back up.
Yep.
I don't know, it just seems like so many channels have gone back to the way commercials were originally. They were integrated as part of the show, The Burns
Yep.
and Allen
Oh
show,
yeah.
they would stop the narrative so that George Burns could
Yep.
enjoy a Lucky Strike cigarette,
Yep.
They'd sponsor the show directly and
Yep.
just have it stuck in there.
Yep. And not to mention, if commercials, were back the way they used to be, we wouldn't have these issues, with companies saying, "Oh yeah, you have to change the content because we think your content isn't good for the people who are going to buy our products." It's like, well, if you haven't seen my audience, then you probably, are looking the wrong thing,
Yeah, that's been a
Like the whole
big
thing.
problem we've had for decades, is the advertisers trying to
Yeah.
decide what the content should be.
Yep.
Isn't that why we call them soap operas? Yeah, because they were selling soap. They would literally stop what they were doing in the middle of the drama and start talking about the soap products that were sponsoring them.
Speaking of soap operas, I always found them fascinating because like they always look so different from regular TV shows.
They're just made on the cheap and made on the fly.
Yeah, yeah. It was later I learned the reason why a lot of soap operas look the way they do, like it almost seems like you're watching a live performance, is because they weren't using standard, cameras, that a lot of professional TV shows did. They were literally just using, tape, commercial tape, tape camcorders and just filming off of that.
And they were multi-camera instead of single camera.
Yep.
So they were just feeding it. They'd feed it all into a booth, and then you would have the editor in the booth who would just live, as it was rehearsed, push buttons that would switch over from one camera view to another. And the director would be calling out, okay, camera 2, move over here, switch to camera 3 and things like that. And they'd just be doing that on the fly, and it would all be live to tape. So the camera
Yeah,
work could look a little bit clumsy, and the editing would look a little bit clumsy.
Yeah, and I think you know this too because, like, I mean, I don't know if you still do it, but you said you were an amateur filmmaker yourself, right?
Yeah, I don't really have the physical ability to do that, which is too bad because I got scripts.
Yeah.
I could get my paint levels back down. I'd like to get back into that, but
I was watching like a variety youth video on YouTube, and they were interviewing some actors and if they could remember their iconic lines. And it's one funny thing I've seen because a lot of actors have said this. It's one thing that a lot of people who try to get into acting fail to realize is that even if you're like a super famous actor, it's still a job and it's still work.
Oh yeah, it's a lot of work.
Yep. Like in the variety
you have no idea, even like a big name star in Hollywood, how many hours a day they work, how hard they work. They're getting up at like 4 a.m, working till like 9 and 10 at night, and just working solid 6 days a week.
Fun fact. That's the reason why many famous actors ended up turning to drugs. Like with a perfectly good example being SNL. I mean, one of the former longtime people said the reason why so many SNL actors were using cocaine, it wasn't because we were stupid but druggies that were chasing a cheap high. It was literally because the producers were having them work like 15-hour shifts and they barely got anything to eat or sleep. Actually, a similar thing happened with rock stars too, and I think Pink Floyd mentioned that in the song, and the song "Comfortably Numb," because the reason why a lot of singers and songwriters, got addicted to drugs is because they were having demanding hours, and when they told their producers, "Hey, listen, man, I'm exhausted, I'm starving, I'm tired, I can't work like this," they'd say, "Oh, here, just take this pill, and all the hunger and tired pains that'll go away." And it turns out that little pill they took was heroin.
Yeah, so they could have the energy to go out and, perform and, work the audience and everything. And then they go back and collapse after that.
Oh yeah, I mean that's actually what happened with the Rolling Stones. The reason why I can't remember if it was Keith Moon or Keith Richards. The reason why he was a big drug addict, I think it was Mick Jagger that brought up. It's literally because their manager forced it on him. Because they went on a really particularly harsh tour, and due to the lack of sleep and poor hygiene, Keith was super duper sick. Was really sick, and rather than getting him, adjusting the tour, to give him time to rest and recover, they just hopped him up on horse tranquilizers, and yeah, it would get him through the show. But then after he was done, he would pass out on the back and fall unconscious for several hours.
So much of what people think they know about drugs and addiction is a myth.
Yeah, going back to what I said about how acting and performing is actually a lot harder work than people realize. There was actually Kevin Bacon, and Kevin Bacon was looking at his old videos, and if he could quote his lines, and he said one of the most physically demanding films that he ever made was ironically one where on the screen he doesn't appear a whole lot, and that was The Hollow Man.
Oh yeah,
and people are like, well, why
VFX and everything.
Yeah, he said because, people are like, what, the Hollow Man? But you're invisible throughout most of that film. It's like, yeah, but I was still physically there. When you see the invisible guy walking around with the clothing. I was still physically there wearing the sweater and all that, but what you don't see is that I was wearing a full green cap, for the green screen so they could get me out of there, in post production, and that thing was very uncomfortable to wear. Yeah, Hollow Man was one of those films where like it had so much potential, but it got ruined because apparently there was some behind the scenes drama that got into an issue.
I didn't know what was going on because it started out like a really good science fiction movie that where everything was nicely thought through, and yeah, they made some science blunders, but they weren't that bad. And you can say, okay, everything's like, and then they just kind of threw it all out the window and just started doing the stupidest stuff that makes no sense. Like
Yeah,
trying to what you had the big steel door, and she was like moving the bolt over with a magnet to try and move the bolt so they could get out of there. But all it would have done was magnetize the door.
yeah.
And then blowing up uh, blowing up what was it? It was some form of nitrous, some form of nitro, but it was an impact explosive, and she blew it up by putting in a centrifuge. I'm like, that would do the opposite.
I've also heard a common complaint with Hollow Man is that it started off as like trying to be like a science fiction thriller, and then like halfway through the film it becomes a horror. Like the scientist
Yeah,
who turns invisible, he suddenly becomes a serial killer for literally no reason.
yeah, and like
Now it is
the first thing he does when he becomes invisible is rape a woman when there's no indication that he's like that at all.
yeah. I mean, now, yeah, that did kind of happen in the original book because it was based off of The Invisible Man by H.G. Wells. But I've read The Invisible Man, and the thing that often gets ignored in that book is like, yeah, Jack Griffin became a psychopath. But here's the thing: that was a gradual process because at first he was just a standard, if a little bit ambitious scientist, and prior to drinking the invisible potion, the worst crime he ever committed was steal money from his father to fund his research. But that was it. He didn't become a psychopath until he realized, hey, there's all this stuff I can do as an invisible man, and I've got all this power. He basically became corrupted. Basically,
Well, and also that was after several times of taking it when the drug was affecting his mind.
yeah, it's also that too. It's also heavily implied that the drug was making him super paranoid and violent. Because like if I recall correctly, his colleague who he reunites him, even he mentions, it's like, what happened to you, Jack? You were never like this, back in school. What happened to you? Because there are times, throughout, the book, where like, he's talking with Kemp, and he's very rational and he's talking and they're having a good intellectual conversation, and then out of the blue he starts going, and that tramp who stole my books, I'll track him down even if I have to kill him. And Kemp is like, whoa, where'd that come from? And he
Yeah,
starts to get a suspicion, I think whatever Jack did to make him invisible, I think it's corrupting his mind too.
yeah, that was the same thing in Jekyll and Hyde. It wasn't so much that the potion like made an evil Hyde came out. Hyde was just more of the id, but it was just over time you had the greater separation where Jekyll is actually the proper pronunciation. Fun fact,
Yeah.
but Jekyll
Oh yeah, I know
became,
that.
huh?
I said I know that, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, but Jekyll became more and more of a milk toast and just became weaker and just lost his assertiveness and just became someone
Yeah.
who was just a
Another
wimp who went
another
along with everything. And then Hyde became more and more assertive, more and more animalistic, more and more, I don't care, I'll do whatever I want. But it was a slow
yeah,
separation between the two.
Another thing that gets ignored about the original book is that, especially in the original book, there was no Mr. Hyde in terms of personality. I think because he later writes in his confession, Dr. Jekyll mentions, when I was younger, I was like that. I was a lot more hedonistic, and I wasn't afraid to take risk, and I always had kind of like that cruel side to me. to me because I used to party and get into fights and do all this bad stuff when I was younger, and he missed that lifestyle because now that he's a sophisticated British gentleman, he can't act like that. All the potion did was change his appearance, and allowed him to do that. And at first, like you said, he only did like minor stuff, like just start minor scuffles, vandalize a few properties. But over time, he got more and more addicted to it, and he started going on to more violent stuff,
To
and
the
it
point
basically
where
just consumed
to the
him.
point where he would just change over to hide without the formula.
Yeah, without yeah, he didn't even need the formula anymore because he was just becoming, he was becoming addicted, and that's why, spoiler alert, he ultimately killed himself in the end because he realized I can't get rid of Hyde no matter what I do.
Well, he made it so that he died as Hyde, but then doing that killed Jekyll as well. People find it weird that in the Frederick March version they're still using the Jekyll pronunciation, but that is an awesome version, the 1931 version. It's far better than the Spencer Tracy version that they made like 10 years later, which was basically a remake. And Spencer Tracy was good, but the rest of the movie just wasn't that well done. Whereas in the Frederick March version, not only was Frederick March brilliant, but everyone else was too.
I'm back. Sorry, I had to go to the bathroom.
Okay, yeah, I was just talking about how brilliant the Frederick March version was, especially compared to the Spencer Tracy version.
Actually, actually going back to the Invisible Man, Hollowed Man actually did actually point out one major flaw with being invisible that the original Invisible Man didn't cite as a flaw with being invisible. It would be a pain in the ass to sleep because your eyelids, would be invisible. So yeah, they'd still be protected from dust and dirt, but they would still see the light.
Well, actually, the problem that they did a fairly good job of explaining is that you wouldn't be able to see it all because light wouldn't be reflecting on your retina. And so, if you remember, when he turned invisible, he was blind, which again is something they seem to have forgotten at the end because it really seemed like he could see everything there at the end.
Yep.
But he was having to feel his way around, and of course, you could only see him on like the infrared. I don't know. It's just like halfway through the movie, or maybe a third of the way through the movie, someone else took over and started making a completely different
Yeah.
movie.
I mean, I think that's the reason why it ended up the way it does, because Kevin Bacon mentioned. I've heard a lot of people saying that the film did go through a lot of production hell. Like I said, it was meant to be kind of a remaster of H.G. Wells' Invisible Man, but they wanted to take more of a modern philosophical twist to it. But then halfway, like there was studio interventions, there was accidents, and then I guess somewhere along the line, someone said, you know what? Let's just make it another horror thriller."
The executive meddling has ruined so many films.
Oh yeah.
Is there one film that was actually made better by executive meddling?
I mean, I
Because
know
I
there's
don't know
been.
of any.
I mean, I know there have been films, that almost certainly would have been disasters had it not been like for someone telling the director, "Hey, this scene, how about we change it?" But as far to my knowledge, it never came. It never came from the executive. It usually came either from a co-director, one of the actors, or maybe a friend that was brought aboard, to help out.
Yeah, or a
You
DP
know,
or someone like that.
yeah, yeah. It was never an executive going crap.
Actually, you'd be amazed at how much influence the editor has on the
Yep.
final product,
Oh yeah.
and how
Well, I mean,
good
yeah. He's
how
the.
good a film turns out. A lot of it has to do with how much you're going to listen to your editor because your editor knows what they're talking about.
Oh yeah, that is true. I mean, when you see, when you have like a film on Blu-ray or DVD, and it has deleted scenes and all that, a thing that often gets ignored is that those deleted scenes that you see, those are the only ones that were actually edited, and then at the very last minute they took out. When most movies are made, there's like over 20 hours of a lot of footage.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, there's like scenes. There's like
There's scenes
scenes.
that never even, make it onto the stage to get filmed.
you know, yeah, or they're partially filmed, but then at the last minute, the director says, "Actually, you know what? This scene's not important to the film.
Yeah.
Let's just leave it. Let's just not even finish it, and then we'll just take it out during editing.
The scene's not working out and it's just going to weigh down the story. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, just man, I feel really bad, for the pre-digital era editors, because I've seen interviews, with some film editors, and they did say that, that when computers and digital editing came about, that was the biggest celebration in our life, because pre-digital age editing was a nightmare. You would literally take, like the dozens of hours of film the director had, and you literally had to cut it and stitch it together by hand to make the
Yep.
film.
You'd cut it with a razor blade and put it together. I never
Yeah,
did that, but I did do editing back in the videotape days where you'd have the tape deck and then you'd have like 4 source tapes and then your destination tape. So you'd go through a source tape, you get your jog shutter, get it right on the frame, you go, okay, that one, you'd hit the button, we'll put that frame in. Okay, now where are we going to? We're going here. No, that's too far. Jog shutter back, to the right frame or back and forth till you get on the right frame, hit that. And that's one shot. And then you do that shot per shot per shot. And then
yeah,
at the end, you finally hit a button and it goes through and copies all of those over to the destination tape. So much easier doing it digitally.
and yeah, going back to what you said, there actually have been, I can't think of them at the top of my head, but there have been some pretty iconic films, that actually had a lot of potential to tell great stories, but they failed. But they failed because why? Because the editor, so many people say, well, the film just felt kind of confusing, and like it was way too fast paced, like what was going on, and it turns out it was all the editor. Like the director had directed scenes that made the film flow more naturally, but then the editor, often because of pressure from the producer, said, "Oh no, let's cut that film down. Let's remove that scene," ignoring the fact that those scenes were critical.
Yeah.
Mm.
I mean, that's the thing. An editor is going to want to tighten things up because
Yeah.
you don't want the scenes to plod along. But some
Yeah.
scenes should be like that to build up suspense or whatever.
Oh yeah.
And it's kind of because most of the things, with a couple of exceptions, most of the things I've edited are things that I've either directed or at least shot, but I was there on the day, when everything was filming and I knew what was going on. When you're just getting like all of this footage that was shot, by someone else, and you've just got the shooting script and you got to piece it all together, it can be kind of confusing. And you're like, okay, I'm going to put it together, but it's going to take a lot of feedback from the director to actually make it work.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I know I bring them up all the time, but it's like that really old South Park joke, the Terrence and Phillip commercial where Russell Crowe's hosting the show Fighting Around the World, and he's like, "And now, Tucker, we're in. Oi, what's going on here? Weren't we in Brooklyn fighting minorities? Honk, honk! It's that bloomin' editor. He cut the fight scene a minute short." And then he goes behind scenes and he grabs the editor. It's like, who do you think you are? Oh, I'm the editor. I know who you are. Why'd you cut my fight scene short? Dude, the producer told me to do it. He said it was dragging on. More fighting is poetry. You don't censor Russell Crowe's poetry. That was a really funny episode. It's even funnier when, like, in the DVD commentary, Matt Stone and Trey Parker flat out said the whole point they made that episode was just to roast Russell Crowe, who they're actually really good friends with, so it was nothing personal. Yeah.
I'm going to see if the chat's frozen up or.
Isn't
Let's
that
look at
why
the
we call
Rumble
them
chat
soap
again.
operas? You want to know something funny about soap opera, Shane? You know the soap opera All My Children? I have never watched an episode. I have no idea what the story is, but I absolutely love the theme song. I don't know why.
The theme song for what?
All My Children.
Oh,
Yeah. It's got like a nice little soothing jazz thing to it.
because then there's rumors of lost episodes being found, but
Oh, Fighting Zenith, yeah. By the way, I heard from Clownfish TV that Cover was a dream. Yeah, I mean, I that really doesn't surprise me. Like, Colbert's all like, "Oh, they fired me because I made fun of Charlie Kirk in my freedom of speech." I think they wanted to get rid of him a long time ago because
yeah.
from what I've read, his ratings were in the dumps and it was there. But the problem is that he had an airtight alibi and a contract, and they couldn't just fire him without facing a lawsuit. So they were literally just waiting for anything to fire him for.
Yeah, they could activate a morality clause or something.
Yeah, And to my knowledge, the only reason they hired him back was because a lot of the workers at CBS were getting threats, from Antifa people.
And getting back to the lost Doctor Who episodes, I think one of them said years ago that, like, okay, I'm going to level with you. We've got episodes that you haven't seen that haven't been released, but we don't want to do that until we get a full and complete story. Because if, like, there's a 4-part serial and they get 3 parts of it, then the demand for that 4th part, is going to be so great that
Mm,
that it'll be more difficult to get.
yeah. I mean, going back to what you said
But
about
but a
Doctor
lot
Who,
of
like,
it is just a lot of it's because there was, I think, the start of these rumors they're talking about. There was one, because all of these are film collectors, and the film collectors, most of them didn't even know what they had, because what they would do is they would just go to, yard sales, or if they got wind that, so and so was throwing out these film canisters, they'd go and grab them and, put them in their collections. And there was one who just had a whole bunch of stuff, not just Doctor Who, but they said there were some really nice finds in there from a lot of other lost films. And they were going to work with him to go through and catalog his collection. And there was a trust that they were going through to to get everything cataloged and come up with a good price for his collection, so that it would be fair and everything. And they were like within 7 days of closing the deal, and he died, which means that it's now out of the hands of his trust and is now in the hands of his estate and whoever's managing his estate. So they basically have to start over. They're confident they can get it. It's just going to mean a delay of several months, but they think there are some Doctor Who's in there, and some other some other nice finds. They didn't say what, but lost films that people are going to be interested in. And that's the thing, because the film collecting, that's not really a thing people do today, because they're not really doing things on film. So all of the people who are film collectors are kind of aging out, and they're getting to the point where they are at end of life. And so they're trying to, reach out to them and go through and catalog their film collection so that you can at least know what they have, and try and reclaim a lot of these lost films that might be in their collection, before they pass on.
yeah, I was looking it up. Apparently, it's another classic silent film that was almost lost for many decades. Nosferatu, the original 1922 film.
Yeah. Well, I was
Yeah.
just talking about the Frederick March, Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. That was lost until like just 20 years ago or something. Because when Paramount made the Spencer Tracy version, they enlisted on this program of buying up all of the canisters of the Frederick March version and destroying them, because they wanted the Spencer Tracy version to be the only version that was out there.
Yeah. So I looked it up, and yep, the reason why was because Nosferatu was almost lost for a long time because a few years after it was released, Bram Stoker's family sued, because Nosferatu was meant to be a Dracula film, but they were having copyright issues with the Stoker estate, so they released it anyway and renamed it. But they said nope, it's still too similar, and the court ruled in Bram Stoker's favor, so they had to destroy all the copies. And for many decades, it was thought to be lost until a couple of copies were accidentally discovered in a film vault in Austria, apparently.
Yeah, and because of all of the false rape accusations in the three trials, a lot of the Fatty Arbuckle um, films are lost, and some of them have been found and
Yeah,
restored.
I saw like a documentary about Fatty Arbuckle. That was such a sad story, you
Oh,
know.
it was horrible what they did to him.
Yeah, and you want to know the worst part too is that largely by the point of like when it reached a trial, there was tons of evidence in support of Fatty, and there were credibility, and the case had a really strong chance of being dropped. But the media kept spinning it, and there was public demand for justice, so the court went through with it anyway. And apparently, there's an anecdotal story that apparently, Fatty Arbuckle was friends with one of the newspaper executives, and he sent them a letter begging and saying, "Why are you saying this about me? You know I didn't hurt that girl. You know I'm completely innocent." And the guy reportedly responded, "I know, Fatty, but I gotta sell the papers." And
Yeah.
you know, yeah, this whole cancel culture thing, getting innocent people ruined. It's nothing new. It happened back then too.
Yep.
Yep.
Oh,
Yeah, and
Ted
it's the
Healy
really
was
sad.
not nice to the Three Stooges.
Oh yeah. I think Mo of the Three Stooges, he partially blamed him, for Curly's poor health because he kept abusing them and he kept making them work long hours.
Well, and also Curly did not like shaving his head because he's
Yeah.
called Curly because he has curly hair,
Oh yeah.
and he thought that shaving his head, because before then he was kind of a ladies' man. Well, he was always kind of a
Oh
ladies' man
yeah.
after that too, but he thought
Oh
that,
yeah.
being bald spoiled his looks because he didn't have his nice hair.
Yeah. I do remember. I don't know if it was the actor who played Curly because I know he died shortly after leaving the Three Stooges. But I know Mo said another issue Curly had with being in the Three Stooges that everyone kept assuming he was the dumb one, so they would talk down to him, and also kids would randomly come up to him and hit him with random objects because the thought's like, oh, it's Curly. If we hit him with a board, all that's going to happen is a funny noise is going to occur, and he's going to go, oh, why'd you do that? That when in actuality, those were
Yeah.
props. Another fun fact too that many people fail to realize: the original Three Stooges trio, it was Mo, Larry, and Shemp, but Shemp, didn't like the producer they were working under because he was really abusive, so he left, and then Curly agreed to come in.
Yeah, he didn't want to do the films under Ted Healy. He'd been the third one on the stage, but
Yeah, yeah, that's the
didn't
thing
want to
that
do the
a lot of
films.
people fail to realize is that the Three Stooges was originally a stage show.
Well, same with the Marx Brothers.
Yep,
Like the first
and I mean,
half of the Marx Brothers films are the stage performances.
yeah, and if I recall correctly, in the stage performances, the Three Stooges weren't even like the main focus. It was actually focused on, I forgot his name, a guy who was the straight man, and the whole joke of the thing is that he ran his own independent company that would do random chores, basically the chore of the day, but they would keep getting botched up because there's only the three workers, like I said, were a bunch of stooges, and they would always mess everything up. That was the whole thing.
Hollywood was never all that good to actors.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I do actually remember seeing like a really old video from the 1960s, which like interviewed Mo Howard. Mo Howard, and actually, from what despite the character he played, he was actually like a really soft-spoken and very nice guy. Apparently,
Yeah.
yeah. Like he did
Oh,
say,
we've got Harpo Marx talks from findings, and I'm guessing this is because he did a couple of radio interviews, and the ironic thing is he has a really good speaking voice, arguably a better speaking voice than the other three.
oh yeah, didn't he like play like that silent curly guy that would like he wouldn't talk, he would just show up and
Yeah,
do funny antics. Yeah,
and hung the horn. Yeah, they would
yeah.
if in the scripts if there was like if too much time had gone, they felt without there being a gag, they would just literally write in the script, Harpo does something funny. And he always would.
Yep.
And going
So
back to
actually, kind of
Curly, it was the same thing because if the scripts were like too short, they would just throw a page in and the page would say Curly, and then so that just meant just point the camera at Curly for a while and just let him go.
also another fun little fact about Curly. Apparently, that funny shuffle he did apparently that actually that actually was when they asked him why he did that, that was actually improvised, and apparently it was actually based on an exercise he did because as a kid he accidentally shot himself in the foot with a rifle, and as a result he suffered tissue damage, so he had to relearn how to walk. And apparently that shuffle he did was what he used to do as he was recovering, so he could walk comfortably. And I guess he did that, and I guess he did that because his old injury was acting up, and the director was like, "Hey, that's funny. Keep doing that." Although going back to the Three Stooges, it's one thing I also give Mo Howard really credit for. He once continued doing a skit, even though he broke two ribs. There was that one. I forgot which skit it was, but the Three Stooges, their characters are playing carpenters, and he's standing on a table, and in a rare case, he actually got injured because the table broke too soon, and he landed chest first. Apparently, according to Mo Howard, he actually did that with a broken rib, and he was in a lot of pain when he did the slap scene. Yeah,
Yeah,
that grimace you see on his.
Tom Baker did most of the Santarin experiment with a broken collarbone because there were a number of stunts called for the doctor, and he was like, "Oh sure, yeah, I can do my own stunts. Yeah, that'll be fine." And like the first stunt he did, he landed wrong, broke his collarbone, and so they had to use the stunt man for the rest of them. But that's also kind of why he's like walking around and like not moving his arm all that much.
Yep. Yeah, something happened like that with Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. Even though Harrison Ford does most of his own stunts, that was the one film where he almost entirely worked on a stuntman, but there was actually a reason why he did that, and that was because in the middle of filming, he woke up and he was in a tremendous amount of pain, and he couldn't move. And the onset medic took a look at him, and they said, "Oh yeah, you herniated a disc in your spine," so he had to be flown back to the United States. And they had to perform surgery on him, and by the time he was out and ready to work, the doctor gave them strict orders. Yeah, all those crazy stunts you do, you can't do that because you'll re-herniate the disc. So even when he was back in action, they still had to get a stunt double because he for his own health, he couldn't do it.
Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah, and contrary to how Indiana Jones is portrayed, Harrison Ford is not afraid of snakes. There's actually behind the scenes footage of him during the scene, and he's actually playing with well, they didn't use actual snakes. They weren't actually snakes. They were a type of legless lizard called glass snakes that he was playing with. Like he said in an interview, the only time he was ever scared while filming Raiders of the Lost Ark was when they actually got an actual cobra for the scene, because a cobra can actually kill you. You know.
Well, usually for the movies, though, they have ones where they've removed the venom sacs.
Yeah. Well, apparently the cobra they got, like, it still had its venom intact. Although the thing you got to remember is that there was like a glass screen between him and the cobra. In fact, in old versions of the film, in old VHS copies of the film, if you look really closely, you can actually see the snake's reflection in the glass.
Yeah, a lot of videotapes ended up looking like that because of the way they transfer them from the film. And people are like, well, that looks crazy. But you got to say you got to think when you were looking at it in the theater, it didn't look like that because the dynamic range was different. It was easier to hide stuff like that.
I'm
Like when
not
you
gonna
look
lie
at
though, I actually
those very first videotape transfers of Star Wars, man, the effects look horrible.
oh yeah.
And they didn't look that way in the theater.
It's one film I've talked to people about, that I think, the grittiness of the original VHS tape actually made it better than the DVD release. Disney's Beauty and the Beast, the original animation one, because in the original animation one, due to the lighting, there were scenes where it was particularly dark, and especially in the intro scene, when he's talking about how after he transformed into a beast, he concealed himself inside his castle. And what I liked about that scene and what made it so terrifying and effective is that you can see the beast, but because it's dark, you can't really see his outline, so you don't get a picture of what he's like. And the DVD, they brighten it up, and you can see him clear as the day, and it's just not as
Yeah.
good,
Yeah.
Yeah,
A lot of them are like that.
yeah,
All right. It's 8 o'clock. So anyone have any parting thoughts before we close
no,
off this one?
nope.
Still not seeing much in the YouTube chat. And I don't know how much of a lag we have over on Rumble, but maybe. Yeah, I'm not seeing anything from Zen either. So, all right. Thanks everyone for watching, and we'll see you again next month. Until then, stay strong